Ricky's voice was steady as he slid the termination papers across the mahogany conference table. "You're fired, Shannon. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out." His mistress stood behind him, her manicured hand resting on his shoulder, wearing the smile of someone who'd already won. I stared at the man I'd built an empire with, the man whose bed I still shared last night, and felt my phone pulse 3 times in my jacket pocket. The code I'd embedded 6 months ago had just activated. They had 72 hours before everything collapsed, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me show you how a billionaire's wife became his greatest threat. Before we continue with the story, be sure to subscribe to the channel and give the video a like. Oh, and drop a comment below letting us know where you're watching from. We love seeing that. Ricky's voice was steady as he slid the termination papers across the mahogany conference table. "You're fired, Shannon. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out." His mistress stood behind him, her manicured hand resting on his shoulder, wearing the smile of someone who'd already won. I stared at the man I'd built an empire with, the man whose bed I still shared last night, and felt my phone pulse 3 times in my jacket pocket. The code I'd embedded 6 months ago had just activated. They had 72 hours before everything collapsed. Olivia's perfume, something expensive and cloying, filled the boardroom as she leaned forward. "We've already reassigned your access codes," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I'll be taking over your responsibilities. Ricky thinks it's time for fresh leadership." Ricky's wedding band caught the afternoon light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The same ring I'd placed on his finger 4 years ago, when we stood on a beach in Santorini and he promised we'd build something extraordinary together. "This isn't personal," he added, though we both knew it was. "The company needs to evolve. You've been distracted lately." Distracted. The word hung in the air like an accusation. I'd been distracted by the late-night phone calls he thought I didn't hear, by the receipts for jewelry I never received, by the way he started scheduling investor meetings that somehow always involved Olivia. Security appeared in the doorway, 2 stone-faced men I'd hired myself 8 months ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. "You have 10 minutes to collect your personal items," Ricky said, already turning his attention to his laptop as if I'd already ceased to exist. I stood, smoothing the fabric of my blazer, and picked up the leather portfolio that held 4 years of strategic plans, product roadmaps, and architectural diagrams that only I truly understood. My phone pulsed again. The timer was running. 72 hours until the first system failures would begin. 96 hours until the infrastructure would start collapsing. 1 week until Ricky Graham would understand exactly what he'd just done. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how we got here. 4 years ago, Ricky and I sat in a cramped co-working space in downtown San Francisco, our laptops nearly touching across a coffee-stained table. Outside, the fog rolled through the Mission District while we mapped out what would become Graham Technologies on a whiteboard we'd borrowed from the conference room. What if we could create software that anticipates infrastructure failures before they happen? Ricky had said, his eyes alive with that entrepreneurial fire I found irresistible. Not just respond to crashes, but predict them with AI? I remember pausing mid-keystroke, my fingers hovering over the code I was writing. "I can build that," I told him, pulling up a new terminal window. "Give me 6 months, and I'll create predictive algorithms that will revolutionize the entire industry." He'd moved behind my chair then, reading the initial framework I was already sketching out. "This is brilliant, Shannon. This is why you're the genius, and I'm just the guy who talks to investors." I'd laughed. "You're the one who convinced 3 venture capital firms to take us seriously. I'd still be coding in my apartment if you hadn't pitched them. Then we're perfect together," he'd said, kissing the top of my head. "Your brain, my charm. Equal partners in everything. Equal partners." I believed that then. God, how naive I was. Those early months were intoxicating. We'd work until 3 a.m., fueled by Thai takeout and the absolute certainty that we were building something revolutionary. Ricky handled the business development, courting investors, negotiating contracts, building our client pipeline. I lived in the code, constructing the AI infrastructure that would become our flagship product line by line, algorithm by algorithm. Our wedding happened during our Series A funding round. We flew to Santorini for a weekend ceremony, just us, an officiant, and a photographer we found on Instagram. I wore a white silk dress I bought in Athens the day before, and Ricky wore a linen suit that made his eyes look impossibly blue against the Mediterranean backdrop. Standing on that cliff overlooking the Aegean Sea, he made promises that went beyond the traditional vows. "We're building more than a company," he'd whispered, his forehead pressed against mine. "We're building a life. Your success is my success. Your dreams are my dreams, 50-50 in everything, forever." I believed every single word. The company exploded faster than either of us anticipated. Within 2 years, we'd moved from the co-working space to our own headquarters in Soma, a converted warehouse with exposed brick, industrial lighting, and enough space for the 50 employees we'd hired. We signed our first 8-figure contract with a Fortune 500 company. Suddenly, Graham Technologies wasn't just a startup, it was a player. At least, I thought it was ours. The shifts started subtly, almost imperceptibly. During our weekly leadership meetings, Ricky began rephrasing my technical updates. "What Shannon means," he'd interrupt, "is that we're improving system efficiency by 40%, as if I couldn't articulate my own achievements. When I confronted him privately, he'd pull me close and kiss my frustration away. "I'm just translating for the non-technical people, babe. You know how investors glaze over when you get into the algorithms." Then the client presentations changed. I'd spend weeks preparing product demonstrations, only to watch Ricky deliver them while I sat silently beside him, reduced to advancing PowerPoint slides. "Shannon's our technical mastermind," he'd tell clients, gesturing toward me like I was an exhibit. "She built everything you're seeing today." Built, past tense, as if my work was finished. As if I wasn't still the one maintaining the entire infrastructure. Writing updates, solving the impossible problems that kept the company operational. The elevator descended in silence. The polished steel walls reflecting a woman I barely recognized. My hands were steady as I clutched my leather portfolio, but inside, something was fracturing clean and precise, like code breaking at a semicolon. Security deposited me at my car in the underground garage. The moment I slid into the driver's seat, I pulled out my laptop, the one Ricky thought was just for personal use. The one that held mirror access to every server, every database, every communication channel in Graham Technologies. I'd suspected for months, the late meetings, the business trips to conferences Ricky had never attended before. The way he'd installed Olivia as Director of Strategic Operations 3 months ago. A position that hadn't existed until she needed a title that justified her presence in every high-level meeting. But suspecting and knowing are 2 different kinds of pain. My fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing the security protocols I'd designed myself. Within seconds, I was inside the executive email server. I started with 6 months ago, right around the time Ricky had suggested I take a step back from client-facing work to focus on the technical side. The first email I found was dated March 15th. Subject line, "Shannon, problem." Ricky to Olivia. "She's getting suspicious about the consulting fees. We need to move faster on the transition plan. Once the Patterson contract closes, we'll have enough leverage with the board to restructure her role." I felt my breath catch. The Patterson contract. I'd spent 4 months building custom integrations for them, working 16-hour days to meet their impossible deadline. And Ricky had been using it as leverage to push me out. I scrolled further. April 3rd. Olivia to Ricky. "The investors are asking about Shannon's equity stake. They're concerned about the optics if we terminate a co-founder. Maybe we frame it as her choosing to step away? Burnout narrative." Ricky's response. "Let me handle Shannon. She trusts me. I'll convince her it's her idea." The parking garage suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. I remembered that conversation, late April, after I'd worked 72 hours straight fixing a critical system vulnerability. Ricky had brought home my favorite Thai food, poured me a glass of wine, and suggested maybe I was pushing too hard. Maybe I needed to delegate more. Maybe Olivia could shoulder some of the strategic burden. I'd thought he was being considerate, caring, concerned about my health. He'd been manipulating me. My hand trembled slightly as I opened the next folder. May 12th. A thread with 17 messages. Ricky to Olivia. Board meeting went perfectly. I positioned Shannon's technical obsession as a liability, made it clear the company needs mature business leadership, not a coding genius who can't see the bigger picture. Sterling and Martinez are on our side now. Sterling, our lead investor, who I'd pitched personally 2 years ago. Martinez, who'd told me just last month that I was the heart of Graham Technologies, and Ricky had been systematically turning them against me, painting my expertise as a weakness, my contributions as obstacles. I scrolled faster now, watching the conspiracy unfold in carefully worded emails and calculated meetings. June brought discussions of equity restructuring. July outlined plans to minimize Shannon's board involvement. August detailed how to document performance concerns that didn't actually exist. Then I found the email from September 28th, 2 weeks ago. Olivia to Ricky. The lawyer says we can terminate her for cause if we establish a pattern of missed deliverables. You'll need to set impossible deadlines for the next 2 projects, then document her failures. Should take about 3 weeks to build the case. Impossible deadlines, the Morrison project. Ricky had promised them a 6-week timeline for work I'd told him required 12 weeks minimum. When I'd protested, he'd accused me of losing my edge, of making excuses. I'd worked myself to exhaustion trying to meet his arbitrary deadline, and when I'd missed it by 4 days, he'd sent a formal written warning to my file. A warning I'd never seen. A warning that had apparently been building a legal case for my termination. My vision blurred, but I refused to let the tears fall. Not here. Not now. I found the final piece in a folder marked personal. Pictures of Ricky and Olivia. Not recent, these were dated from over a year ago. A charity gala where they stood too close. A business dinner where his hand rested on her lower back. A weekend conference in Austin where, according to the expense reports I pulled up, they'd shared a hotel suite. This hadn't been a recent affair. This had been a calculated takeover, planned and executed with the precision of a hostile merger. And I'd been too buried in code, too focused on building our product, too trusting in the partnership we'd promised each other, to see it happening. I closed the laptop and sat in the darkness of the parking garage, listening to the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. My phone showed 6:47 p.m. Somewhere above me, Ricky and Olivia were probably celebrating, maybe opening champagne, maybe already rearranging my office. They thought they'd won. But as I started my car and pulled out into the San Francisco twilight, I felt something cold and sharp settling in my chest. Not quite anger. Not quite grief. Something cleaner. More focused. Ricky had taught me something valuable in our 4 years together. He'd shown me how to pitch investors, how to negotiate contracts, how to present confidence, even when you're terrified. He'd taught me that in business, sentiment is weakness. He'd forgotten that I'd been paying attention. And he'd made one critical miscalculation. He'd underestimated exactly how much of Graham Technologies existed because of code only I understood, infrastructure only I could maintain, fail-safes only I knew existed. In 72 hours, the first cracks would appear. In 96, the system failures would accelerate. In 1 week, Ricky Graham would understand the difference between running a tech company and actually understanding the technology that powered it. I drove toward my sister's apartment in Oakland, already composing the message I'd send to our top 3 investors. Not angry. Not emotional. Just facts. Just evidence. Just the emails I'd extracted and the timeline I'd documented. Ricky wanted to play corporate warfare. Fine. But he'd brought code to a business fight, and I'd built the battlefield he was standing on. My sister's apartment in Oakland smelled like jasmine tea and the coconut curry she'd been cooking. I sat on her couch with my laptop balanced on my knees, watching the clock in the corner of my screen tick toward midnight. 72 hours since my termination. You should eat something, Maya said from the kitchen doorway, concern etched across her face. You've been staring at that screen for 6 hours. I'm watching a company implode, I replied, not looking up. It's surprisingly calming. On my screen, Graham Technologies' internal monitoring dashboard showed the first hairline fractures. Nothing catastrophic yet, just small anomalies that Ricky's hastily assembled IT team would dismiss as routine glitches. A database query that took 17 seconds instead of 3. Client login authentication, failing intermittently. Backup protocols running out of sequence. The code I'd embedded 6 months ago wasn't a virus or malware, nothing so crude or traceable. It was elegant, surgical. A series of cascading dependencies buried deep in the infrastructure, designed to deteriorate gradually once the master authentication token, my executive access, was revoked. I'd built Graham Technologies' entire back-end architecture, every API integration, every security protocol, every automated workflow. And I'd built it with a single point of failure that only I knew existed: me. My phone buzzed. A text from Natasha, our former chief technology officer, who'd quit 2 months ago when Ricky tried to demote her. "Are you seeing this? The production servers are throwing errors. Did you do something?" I smiled and typed back, "Just watching. Popcorn optional." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then, "You absolute legend." By Friday morning, 48 hours post-termination, the problems escalated from concerning to alarming. I monitored it all from Maya's spare bedroom, which I'd converted into a makeshift command center. My laptop showed Graham Technologies' client support ticket system, which I still had access to through a backdoor maintenance account. The tickets were piling up. I could picture Ricky in the office, probably wearing that charcoal suit he saved for crisis meetings, trying to project confidence while his world quietly unraveled. The IT team he'd kept would be scrambling, running diagnostics that would show nothing obviously wrong, because nothing was obviously wrong. The code was designed to mimic natural system degradation, the kind that happens when critical maintenance gets deferred, when patches aren't applied correctly, when someone who truly understands the infrastructure isn't there to prevent entropy. My phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, another call. Same number. Then a text. "Shannon, it's Marcus from engineering. Please call back. Systems are failing, and we can't figure out why. Ricky won't admit it, but we need you." I deleted the message. Marcus was a good engineer, but he'd sat silently in that boardroom while Ricky fired me. Loyalty had a price. By Saturday, 72 hours exactly, the situation had progressed from problematic to catastrophic. The automated monitoring alerts I was intercepting painted a clear picture. Server response times had degraded by 47%. 3 major clients had reported complete service outages. The predictive AI algorithms, my algorithms, the ones I'd spent 18 months perfecting, were producing nonsensical results, as if they'd forgotten their training data. Because they had. The code was systematically corrupting the machine learning models, introducing tiny errors that compounded with each iteration. By Monday, the AI would be worthless. By Wednesday, it would actively provide harmful recommendations. By the following weekend, Graham Technologies would be facing breach of contract lawsuits from every major client. I made myself a cup of coffee and scrolled through LinkedIn. Graham Technologies' official page had posted nothing since Thursday, unusual for a company that typically shared innovation insights 3 times weekly. Radio silence was its own kind of message. Then I checked the industry forums where tech executives gossiped under anonymous usernames. Someone had started a thread. Anyone else having issues with Graham Tech's platform? The responses multiplied as I watched. Thought it was just us. Our entire dashboard went dark yesterday. Support tickets aren't being answered. This is really unprofessional. Starting to regret this contract. Anyone know what's happening over there? My phone buzzed again. This time, a string of texts from different numbers, all variations on the same theme. "Please call. We need help. Systems are failing. Ricky is panicking." I turned my phone face down and opened a new browser window. Time to set the next phase in motion. Sunday morning arrived with fog rolling off the bay and my phone exploding with notifications. I'd anticipated this. 72 hours was precisely how long it would take for Ricky to exhaust every other option, for his pride to crack, for desperation to override his ego. 15 missed calls, 8 voicemails, a dozen texts. I listened to the first voicemail on speaker while Maya brought me breakfast. Shannon. Ricky's voice was rough, exhausted. I know you're angry. I know We need to talk. The systems are experiencing critical failures, and the team can't identify the source. I'm not asking you to come back. I'm asking you to tell us what's wrong, please. Clients are threatening to sue. We're hemorrhaging revenue. Just call me back. The second voicemail was less composed. Shannon. This is serious. I don't know what you did, but you need to fix it. This company is everything we built together. You can't just destroy it out of spite. I nearly laughed at that. Out of spite. As if systematic betrayal deserved a measured response. The eighth voicemail, left at 3:47 a.m., was barely coherent. The servers crashed completely. We've lost client data. Shannon, please. I'm sorry about how things ended. I'm sorry about all of it. Just help us stop this. Whatever you want. It's yours. Equity. Control. I'll step down if that's what it takes. Just make it stop. I saved that one. Evidence had value. Maya sat across from me, her expression unreadable. Are you going to respond? Not yet, I said, watching another support ticket flood into the system. Priority, critical. All services offline. Estimated business impact, $2, 3M per day. How much longer? She asked. I pulled up my monitoring dashboard, studying the cascade of failures propagating through the infrastructure, like dominoes falling in slow motion. Database corruptions, authentication failures, API integrations returning null values, backup systems unable to restore because the restoration protocols themselves were corrupted. The code's on a 7-day cycle, I explained. Each day, the degradation accelerates. Right now, they're at 30% functionality. By Tuesday, they'll be at 10%. By Friday, 0. Complete infrastructure collapse. And then what? I closed my laptop and met my sister's eyes. Then, Ricky Graham learns that you can't run a tech company when you've fired the only person who truly understands the technology. My phone buzzed again. Another call from Graham Technologies' main line. I let it ring through to voicemail, already imagining the panic in that converted warehouse office, the frantic meetings, the investors demanding answers that Ricky couldn't provide. The chaos had only just begun, and I had a front row seat to watch everything he'd stolen burn down around him. Monday morning broke over San Francisco with the kind of cruel sunshine that made everything look deceptively perfect. I sat at Maya's kitchen table, laptop open, watching Graham Technologies' world crumble in real time. The company's internal communication system, which I'd also designed, was lighting up like a Christmas tree. Emergency Slack channels, all-hands meetings scheduled and rescheduled. The kind of digital chaos that signaled full-blown crisis mode. I'd intercepted an email Ricky sent to the board at 4:13 a.m. Experiencing critical infrastructure failures. All hands working to resolve. Will provide an update by EOD. That was 12 hours ago. There would be no resolution by end of day. There would be no resolution at all. Not without me. My phone buzzed with a text from Natasha. You're watching this, aren't you? The company just sent out an emergency notice that all client services are operating at limited capacity. Translation. Everything's on fire. I pulled up the client portal. The status page, usually a sea of green checkmarks, was now dominated by red warning indicators. Email services, degraded. Data analytics, offline. Predictive algorithms, malfunctioning. API integrations, intermittent failures. Limited capacity was generous. They were operating at maybe 20% functionality and dropping by the hour. The support ticket system told the real story. Over 300 new tickets in the past 24 hours, compared to the usual 30 or 40. I scrolled through them, each one a small victory. Our entire dashboard has been blank for 16 hours. We have executive reports due today. This is unacceptable. Third day of email delivery failures. We've missed critical client communications. Need immediate resolution, or we're invoking the SLA breach clause. The AI recommendation system is providing completely incorrect data. We almost made a $2M investment decision based on faulty predictions. This is a liability issue. That last one made me pause. The AI corruption was accelerating faster than I'd anticipated. By tomorrow, it wouldn't just be providing bad data, it would be providing catastrophically bad data. The kind that could trigger lawsuits. I opened a separate window to monitor the company's stock price. Graham Technologies had gone public 8 months ago. Ricky's proudest achievement, the moment he'd felt he'd truly made it. The stock had opened at $47 per share on that sunny September morning. Today, it was trading at $31, down 18% in 3 days. By Tuesday afternoon, the situation had progressed from crisis to catastrophe. I was monitoring a video call Ricky was having with the board, another backdoor access I'd maintained. His face filled my screen, and I barely recognized the man I'd married. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His tie was loosened, his hair uncombed. He looked like he'd aged 5 years, in 5 days. "We've brought in external consultants," he was saying, his voice strained. 3 different cybersecurity firms. They've found no evidence of hacking, no malware, no external breach. The systems are just failing. Internally, one of the board members asked, her voice sharp. "What about internal sabotage?" Ricky's jaw tightened. I watched him glance off camera, probably at Olivia. "We've considered that possibility." "You mean you've considered that your ex-wife, who you fired last week, might have done something to the systems she built?" The board member didn't bother hiding her disgust. "The same systems that are now mysteriously collapsing." "Shannon wouldn't," Ricky started, then stopped. "Because of course I would." He knew it. They all knew it. "Have you contacted her?" another board member demanded. "She's not answering." Ricky's composure cracked slightly. "I've called. I've texted. I've sent emails. She's ignoring everything." "Then get a lawyer. Issue a cease and desist. Threaten legal action. Do something, because right now, we're hemorrhaging money and reputation with every hour this continues." The call ended shortly after. I closed the window and sat back, letting the bittersweet satisfaction wash over me. Ricky had spent 4 years systematically undermining me, dismissing my expertise, treating me like a glorified code monkey, while he played CEO. Now he was learning exactly how much of Graham Technologies had existed solely because of my knowledge, my maintenance, my constant vigilance. Wednesday brought the media attention. TechCrunch published an article at 9 a.m. Graham Technologies faces major service disruptions, stock plummets. By noon, 3 more tech publications had picked up the story. By evening, Forbes was running a piece titled, "When Tech Companies Lose Their Technical Talent, a Cautionary Tale." That one quoted an anonymous, former employee, definitely Natasha, saying, "The company's entire infrastructure was built by one person. When you fire that person without transition planning, this is what happens." I screenshotted it and sent it to Maya with a string of emoji. The client defection started that afternoon. First Patterson Industries, the account I'd spent 4 months securing. Then Davidson Corp. Then Westfield Financial. Each one issuing carefully worded statements about service reliability concerns and strategic technology decisions. The stock dropped to $23. My phone rang again. "Ricky." I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message on speaker. "Shannon." His voice was barely above a whisper. "I know you're doing this. I know you embedded something in the code. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to come back. I'm just asking you to tell me how to fix it. Please. The company is dying. Everything we built together is dying. Everything we built together." The irony was exquisite. He'd spent months conspiring to erase me from the company, from the narrative, from the success story. He'd positioned himself as the visionary, the leader, the architect of Graham Technologies' success. And now, watching it all collapse, he was finally being forced to confront the truth. Without me, there was no Graham Technologies. There never had been. I deleted the voicemail and opened my email. 3 messages from different board members, all offering variations of the same deal. Name your price, name your terms, just stop the bleeding. I didn't respond to those either. Not yet. The code still had 4 more days to run its course. 4 more days of escalating failures, mounting losses, and Ricky Graham's growing desperation. Thursday morning, I finally received the message I'd been waiting for. An email from Lawrence Montgomery, Graham Technologies' lead investor and board chairman. Subject line: urgent. Company, survival. Shannon, I'll be direct. The board has lost confidence in Ricky's leadership. We're prepared to offer you the following: immediate reinstatement as co-CEO, 45% equity, stake up from your current 30%, full operational control of all technical decisions, Ricky's resignation from day-to-day operations. This offer expires in 24 hours. After that, we'll have no choice but to declare bankruptcy and liquidate assets. The choice is yours. I read it 3 times, letting each word sink in. They were offering me everything: control, equity, vindication. The company that Ricky had tried to steal was now being handed to me on a silver platter. Outside, fog was rolling in from the bay, obscuring the Oakland hills. I watched it advance, slow and inevitable, and thought about what I really wanted. Revenge was sweet. But was it enough? My phone buzzed one more time. Another voicemail from Ricky. I almost didn't listen, but curiosity won out. Shannon. His voice broke on my name. I destroyed us. I know that now. I thought I was building something great, but all I was doing was tearing down what we'd already built together. I was jealous of your talent, threatened by your brilliance, so I convinced myself you were the problem when you were actually the solution. I'm sorry for all of it. I don't expect forgiveness. I needed you to know. I ended the playback and stared at my laptop screen, at the monitoring dashboard showing Graham Technologies' continued disintegration, at the email offering me everything I'd lost and more. The code would run for 3 more days unless I stopped it. The company would collapse completely unless I intervened. Ricky would lose everything unless I saved him. The question was, what did I want more? The satisfaction of watching him fall, or the power of rising from his ashes? I opened a new email and began to type my response. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that San Francisco gets after fog burns away. I watched the sunrise from Maya's balcony, coffee in hand, while Graham Technologies' reputation disintegrated across every platform that mattered. The Wall Street Journal ran the headline above the fold: Tech darling Graham Technologies in freefall. Founder's firing of co-founder backfires spectacularly. Bloomberg followed with an even more damning piece: When you fire the architect. How Ricky Graham destroyed his own empire. But it was the Twitter thread from a prominent venture capitalist that really set the tone for the day. 15 tweets dissecting exactly how catastrophically Ricky had mismanaged the situation, ending with, "This is what happens when ego eclipses expertise. You can't run a tech company without understanding the technology. Graham Technologies is a masterclass in what not to do." The thread had 47,000 retweets. I scrolled through LinkedIn, where the conversation was even more brutal. Former employees were posting their own experiences, stories of how Ricky had taken credit for technical innovations he didn't understand, of how he'd systematically marginalized the engineering team, of how he'd prioritized appearance over substance. One post from Marcus, the engineer who'd begged me to return, had gone viral. I watched Ricky Graham fire the woman who built 90% of our infrastructure, then act shocked when that infrastructure collapsed. The arrogance was stunning. The consequences are deserved. The company's stock had opened at $18. By noon, it was trading at $14. The investor exodus began that afternoon. I monitored the emergency board call from my laptop, watching as Lawrence Montgomery delivered the news with the grim efficiency of a surgeon amputating a gangrenous limb. Redwood Ventures is withdrawing support. Cascade Capital is pulling their Series C commitment. Sterling Partners wants immediate liquidation of their position. Ricky sat at the head of the conference table, looking like a man watching his own execution. Olivia was notably absent. Apparently she'd called in sick that morning. Convenient. We've lost 37% of our client base in 1 week. Montgomery continued. The remaining clients are demanding service credits, penalty waivers, and contractual renegotiations. Our revenue projections for Q4 are down by $23 million. We can rebuild, Ricky said, his voice hoarse. I can fix this. Just give me time. Time? One of the other board members, Jennifer Kim from Catalyst Ventures, laughed bitterly. Ricky, our reputation is in freefall. Do you know what the industry is calling us? The company too arrogant to keep its own architect. We're a cautionary tale. A joke. Then bring Shannon back, Ricky pleaded. Whatever she wants, whatever it takes. We tried, Montgomery said flatly. She hasn't responded to our offer. Because I was still deciding what I wanted more, vindication or victory. That evening, I did something I hadn't done since my termination. I logged into Twitter from my personal account. My mentions were already flooded. People had connected the dots between Graham Technologies' collapse and my sudden absence. Tech journalists were DMing me, asking for comment. Venture capitalists were reaching out with opportunities to connect. Former colleagues were sending messages of support mixed with barely concealed schadenfreude. I crafted a single tweet and stared at it for 10 minutes before hitting post. Watching people realize that technical co-founder isn't just a title, it's the foundation. When you remove the foundation, everything collapses. Even billion-dollar empires. It went viral within an hour. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Female founders sharing their own stories of being sidelined by male business partners. Engineers detailing similar experiences of being dismissed by CEOs who didn't understand code. Investors admitting they'd made the same mistake of valuing business vision over technical expertise. One response from a prominent tech CEO captured it perfectly. Shannon built the empire. Ricky just lived in it. Never forget who holds the real power in tech companies. Natasha texted me. You just became a folk hero. How does it feel? I typed back. Complicated. By Saturday, the employee defections had begun. I watched LinkedIn update after update. Marcus Rodriguez has accepted a position at Cloudscale Systems. Jennifer Park is excited to announce her new role at DataForge Incorporated. Amit Patel is joining the team at Nexus Technologies. The engineers were fleeing like rats from a sinking ship, and I couldn't blame them. Who wanted to stay at a company known for destroying itself out of ego and betrayal? But it wasn't just about revenge anymore. Somewhere between watching Ricky's empire crumble and seeing my own vindication play out across every tech publication, I'd realized something important. I'd spent 4 years building Graham Technologies. 4 years of late nights. Impossible problems solved. Innovations created from nothing. I'd poured my expertise, my creativity, my soul into that infrastructure. And Ricky had tried to erase me from that story, to rewrite history with himself as the sole genius behind our success. This wasn't just revenge. This was correction. This was the world finally seeing the truth, that technical expertise isn't secondary to business acumen, it's foundational. That you can't build a tech empire without understanding technology. That the person writing the code has more power than the person signing the contracts. I opened my email and reread Montgomery's offer. Co-CEO. 45% equity. Full operational control. Ricky's resignation. Then I opened a new message and began typing my counteroffer. Sunday afternoon, I met Montgomery at a coffee shop in Palo Alto. He looked exhausted, his expensive suit doing nothing to hide the stress of a week spent watching a $400 million investment implode. Thank you for agreeing to meet, he said, ordering a double espresso like he needed it mainlined directly into his veins. I ordered a matcha latte and got straight to business. I've thought about your offer. And I'm not interested in being co-CEO, I said. I'm not interested in working alongside Ricky ever again. Montgomery's face fell. Then the company is finished. You know that. I'm not finished, I continued. I'm interested in sole CEO. 51% equity. Ricky exits completely, no board seat, no advisory role, no connection to the company whatsoever, and Olivia is terminated immediately. That's... Montgomery paused, recalculating. That's a complete takeover. That's a rescue, I corrected. You're not investing in Graham Technologies anymore. You're investing in me. In the person who actually built the technology. In the only person who can save what's left. Montgomery stared at me for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and started typing. I'll need to present this to the full board. But between us? You're right. The company isn't Graham Technologies. It never was. It's Shannon Technologies. It always has been. I felt something shift in my chest, not quite satisfaction, not quite triumph. Something cleaner, more honest. One more condition, I added. We're rebranding. New name, new story. No more living in the shadow of Ricky Graham's ego. Montgomery smiled for the first time since we'd sat down. What did you have in mind? 1. Apex Systems, I said, because we're starting from the top, not rebuilding from the ruins. He extended his hand across the table. I'll have the paperwork drawn up by tomorrow morning. I shook it, feeling the weight of 4 years of betrayal, 1 week of revenge, and the promise of something new settling into place. Ricky had tried to erase me from the story. Instead, I'd written him out of it completely. The empire he'd tried to steal was about to become the legacy I'd always deserved. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on Monday morning, 9 days after my termination. 5 days since the collapse had begun, in earnest. I was awake, sitting in Maya's spare bedroom with my laptop open, monitoring the final stages of system degradation. The code had entered its terminal phase. Within 48 hours, Graham Technologies' entire infrastructure would be completely inoperable, unrecoverable, without my intervention. My phone lit up with Ricky's name. I stared at it for 3 rings before answering, putting it on speaker so I could continue watching the cascade of error messages flooding the monitoring dashboard. Shannon. His voice was wrecked, hoarse from what sounded like hours of crying or shouting or both. Thank God. Please don't hang up. I said nothing. Just listened to him breathe on the other end of the line, ragged and desperate. I know you're doing this, he continued, words tumbling out in a rush. I know you embedded something in the code. The consultants, the cybersecurity firms, they all say the same thing. This isn't a hack. This is intentional degradation built into the architecture itself, and you're the only one who could have done it. Is there a question coming? My voice was calm, almost clinical. Or did you wake me up at 3 a.m. for a technical diagnosis you already have? Please. The word cracked. Shannon, please. We built this together. 4 years of our lives, our marriage, our dreams. You can't just destroy it all. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I can't destroy it? That's interesting, Ricky. Because you seemed pretty comfortable destroying it when you fired me. When you replaced me with your mistress. When you spent months plotting to erase me from the company I built. I made a mistake. His breathing was uneven, panicked. A terrible, stupid mistake. I was jealous. Threatened. You were always the genius, the one everyone wanted to talk to at events, the one investors asked for by name, and I convinced myself that meant I didn't matter, that I was just the business guy riding your coattails. You were right about that part, I said quietly. The silence that followed was brutal. I could hear him trying to formulate a response, failing, trying again. The company is dying, he finally whispered. We've lost $47 million in market value. 60% of our clients have terminated their contracts. The board is talking about bankruptcy. Shannon, we're going to lose everything. You're going to lose everything. I corrected. I already lost it. 9 days ago, when security escorted me out of the building. I worked 18-hour days to build. Then what do you want? Desperation made his voice climb higher. Name it. Anything. I'll step down as CEO. I'll give you majority equity. I'll sign over the house, the cars, the investment accounts. I'll make a public statement saying you were the true founder, that I was nothing without you. Whatever it takes, Shannon. Just stop this. Please stop this. I watched another critical system failure cascade across my screen. The email infrastructure had just collapsed completely. By morning, Graham Technologies wouldn't even be able to send automated password resets. You don't understand, I said softly. This isn't about what I want from you, Ricky. This is about what you can't give back. You can't return the 4 years I spent building something I thought we were creating together. You can't undo the months you spent systematically undermining me. turning the board against me, planning my removal with your mistress. I know I can't fix what I broke. But we can start over. We can rebuild. The word came out sharp as a blade. There is no we, Ricky. There hasn't been a we since you decided Olivia was more valuable than your wife. Maybe longer. Maybe since the first time you interrupted me in a meeting to translate my own technical work. Maybe since you started believing your own myth that you were the visionary and I was just the coder. Shannon, do you know what the worst part is? I continued, my voice steady despite the anger rising in my chest. You actually convinced yourself you deserved this. That you'd earned the right to push me out. That your charm and your business degree and your investor meetings were more important than the infrastructure I built, the algorithms I wrote, the impossible problems I solved at 3 a.m., while you slept peacefully beside me. His breath hitched. I was wrong. God, Shannon, I was so wrong. About all of it. You were always the heart of this company. The brain, the soul, everything that mattered. I see that now. Please, just tell me how to fix this. I pulled up another window, the contract Montgomery had sent over. Sole CEO, 51% equity, Ricky's complete removal from the company, Olivia's termination, rebranding to Apex Systems. You can't fix it, I said quietly. Because I already have. What? I met with Montgomery yesterday. The board has approved my counteroffer. As of 9 a.m. this morning, I will be the sole CEO and majority owner of the company. You will be removed from all positions, divested of your remaining equity at a negotiated price, and prohibited from using the Graham Technologies name in any future ventures. The silence on the other end was absolute. I imagined him in our bedroom, his bedroom now sitting on the edge of the bed we'd once shared. Processing the magnitude of what I'd just said. You're taking the company, he finally whispered. I'm taking my company back, I corrected. The one I built, the one you tried to steal, and I'm renaming it, rebranding it, and removing every trace of your involvement. Within 6 months, no one will remember that Ricky Graham ever had anything to do with Apex Systems. Shannon, you can't. I can, and I am. The papers will be delivered to your office at 8 a.m. Security will escort you out by 9. I suggest you have your personal items packed. I paused, letting the full weight of the reversal sink in. You'll have 10 minutes, Ricky, just like you gave me. This is revenge. His voice broke completely. This is just cruel revenge. No, I said, surprisingly calm. Revenge would be letting the company collapse completely, letting you lose everything including your reputation and your ability to ever work in tech again. Revenge would be releasing those emails you exchanged with Olivia to the press, letting everyone see exactly how calculated your betrayal was. I pulled up the folder I'd labeled insurance screenshots of every conspiratorial message, every manipulative strategy session, every lie he'd told about me to the board. This is justice, I continued. You made your choice when you fired me. You chose Olivia over our partnership. You chose your ego over our marriage. You chose to believe you could run a tech company without understanding the technology. Now, you get to live with those choices. Shannon, please. He was openly crying now. Don't do this. I love you. I know I destroyed everything, but I love you. We can fix this. We can go to counseling, rebuild trust, start over. You don't love me, Ricky. The words came out tired, final. You love what I can do for you. You love having the brilliant technical founder who makes you look good at investor meetings. You love the woman who solves your impossible problems at 3 a.m. But you never loved me enough to see me as your equal. You never loved me enough to protect what we built together, instead of trying to take it for yourself. I heard him take a shuddering breath, searching for arguments that didn't exist. The code will stop degrading once I assume control, I said. I'll stabilize the systems, restore client services, and begin the work of rebuilding what you destroyed. But you won't be part of that, Ricky. You made sure of that when you fired me. Shannon. Goodbye, Ricky. Security will see you out at 9 a.m. Don't make them drag you. I ended the call and set my phone face down on the desk. My hands were steady, my breathing calm. Outside, Oakland was still dark, the city sleeping through the final hours before everything changed. In 6 hours, I would walk back into the building Ricky had tried to steal from me. In 6 hours, I would be announced as CEO and majority owner of what would soon become Apex Systems. In 6 hours, Ricky Graham would experience exactly what I'd felt 9 days ago. The humiliation of being escorted out by security, the sting of losing everything in 10 minutes, the crushing weight of understanding too late what he'd thrown away. He'd called it cruel revenge. But he was wrong. This was simply the natural consequence of trying to remove the foundation from a building while standing on the roof. I opened my laptop and began writing the company-wide email I'd send at 9:01 a.m., right after Ricky's security escort. It was time to tell the real story of Graham Technologies and introduce them to Apex Systems, built on the same brilliant infrastructure, but finally acknowledged for what it had always been. Mine. 3 months after taking control of Apex Systems, I sat in my corner office, the one that had been Ricky's, completely redecorated, reviewing quarterly reports that showed a 42% revenue increase from our lowest point. The transformation had been swift and surgical. Within 24 hours of assuming CEO duties, I'd stabilized the infrastructure, restored client services, and sent a company-wide email explaining the leadership transition. Within a week, I'd rehired the engineers who'd fled and brought in Natasha as my new CTO. Within a month, we'd launched Apex Systems with a rebranding campaign that positioned us as a phoenix rising from corporate betrayal. The tech press ate it up. Forbes ran a cover story. How Shannon Rebuilt Her Empire. A masterclass in resilience. TechCrunch published a long-form piece titled, The Technical Founder Who Took Back Control. Every major publication wanted interviews, podcast appearances, keynote speeches. I accepted some, declined others. Focused primarily on the work that had always mattered most to me. Building exceptional technology. My phone buzzed with a text from Montgomery. Board meeting tomorrow. Everyone wants to congratulate you on the Patterson renewal. They're calling you a miracle worker. I smiled. Patterson Industries, the account I'd originally secured, that Ricky had used as leverage to push me out, had not only renewed their contract but doubled their commitment. When their CEO called to discuss terms, he'd been blunt. We contracted with Shannon's technology, not Ricky's ego. Now that she's back in charge, we're all in. That had been the pattern. Client after client returning, explaining they'd stayed with Graham Technologies because of the infrastructure I'd built, tolerating Ricky's leadership only because they trusted my technical vision. Once I was back in control, their relief was palpable. Life beyond Apex Systems had settled into something unexpected. Freedom. I'd started consulting on the side, 2 hours here, 3 hours there, helping startups avoid the architectural mistakes that could cripple them later. Word spread quickly. Within 6 weeks, I had a wait list of companies willing to pay premium rates for my expertise. One Saturday afternoon, I sat in a coffee shop in Berkeley, reviewing code for a health tech startup whose founders were 2 women fresh out of Stanford. They'd specifically sought me out after reading about the Apex Systems turnaround. We want to build something that can scale without us, the CEO explained. Something that doesn't collapse if we ever get pushed out by investors or partners. I recognized myself in her wariness, in the way she clutched her laptop like a shield. Then we build in redundancy, I told her. Not just in the systems, but in the documentation, the knowledge transfer, the architecture. You make sure at least 3 people understand every critical component. That's the opposite of what most founders do, she said. Everyone talks about being the indispensable genius. Being indispensable made me vulnerable, I replied. Being irreplaceable made me powerful. There's a difference. She hired me on the spot for a 6-month consulting contract worth more than I'd made in my first 2 years at Graham Technologies. I heard about Ricky through the industry grapevine. Tech is a small world, and schadenfreude spreads faster than innovation. He'd tried to start a consulting firm, positioning himself as a business strategy expert for tech companies. The response had been ice cold. Who wanted business advice from the man who'd fired his technical co-founder and watched his company implode? LinkedIn showed he'd pivoted to executive coaching, then to venture advisory. Each title sounding more desperate than the last. His posts, once confident declarations about leadership and vision, now read like justifications, subtle attempts to rewrite history. One post caught my attention. Biggest lesson from my years in tech. Respect the people who build your infrastructure. They're not support staff, they're the foundation. Natasha sent it to me with 3 laughing emojis, and the comment, "Only took him losing everything to figure that out." I didn't respond to his post. Didn't like it, didn't share it, didn't acknowledge it. He'd learned his lesson, but not from me. From consequence. The real reckoning came 6 months after my takeover, when Tech Insight published their annual Most Influential Tech Leaders list. I ranked 14th. The write-up read, "Shannon didn't just save a failing company, she exposed the myth that business acumen matters more than technical expertise in tech. By reclaiming Apex Systems, she proved that in technology companies, the architect holds more power than the pitchman." Ricky didn't appear on the list. For the first time in 4 years. A week later, I received an email from him. The subject line was simply, "Congratulations. Shannon, I saw the Tech Insight ranking. You earned it. You earned all of it. I won't insult you with apologies you've heard before. I just wanted you to know I'm watching what you've built with Apex Systems, and I finally understand what I was too arrogant to see before. The company was never mine. It was always yours. I just got to borrow it for a while. I hope you're happy. You deserve to be. R." I read it twice, then archived it without responding. Some bridges weren't meant to be rebuilt, they were meant to be lessons about where not to build next time. 9 months after the takeover, Maya and I sat on her balcony watching the sun set over the bay. I'd just signed the papers on a penthouse in Soma, my first major personal purchase since everything changed. "You did it," Maya said, raising her wine glass. "Full Phoenix moment. How does it feel?" I considered the question seriously. "Powerful," I said finally. But not because I destroyed Ricky. Because I proved something I always knew but couldn't make anyone else see. That technical expertise isn't secondary to business strategy in a tech company. It's primary. It's foundational. You proved it by watching everything burn down without you, Maya pointed out. I proved it by being the only one who could rebuild it, I corrected. Ricky thought he could replace me. The board thought they could operate without me. The investors thought my value was negotiable. And they all learned the same lesson. You can't run a tech company when you've removed the person who understands the technology. My phone buzzed with an email from a reporter requesting an interview for a book about women in tech. I added it to my assistant's queue, the assistant I'd hired last month when the speaking requests became overwhelming. "What about Ricky?" Maya asked quietly. "Do you ever think about what he's doing?" "Sometimes," I admitted. But not with anger anymore, mostly with pity. He had everything: a brilliant partner, a thriving company, a marriage built on shared dreams. And he traded it all for his ego and a mistress who disappeared the moment the money dried up. Olivia had resigned 2 days before I'd taken over, accepting a position at a competitor. Last I heard, she'd been fired 3 months later for performance issues. Karma had a beautiful sense of timing. "Do you think he learned anything?" Maya wondered. I watched the last rays of sunlight paint the Oakland hills gold. "I think he learned that reputation, once destroyed, is almost impossible to rebuild. That trust, once broken, doesn't reset. That you can't charm your way out of consequences when everyone knows exactly what you did." I pulled up Apex Systems' stock price on my phone. We were trading at $63 higher than Graham Technologies had ever reached under Ricky's leadership. Higher than he'd ever imagined possible. "I learned something too," I added. That my power was never in the company name or the CEO title. It was in what I could build. What I could solve. What I understood that no one else did. Ricky could fire me from a company, but he couldn't take away my expertise. And that expertise is what rebuilt everything he destroyed. Maya clinked her glass against mine. To expertise over ego. To foundations over facades, I replied. Below us, San Francisco glittered with possibility: startups launching in garages, engineers solving impossible problems, technical founders building empires that would either respect their expertise or learn the hard way what happens when you don't. I'd become more than a cautionary tale about firing your technical co-founder. I'd become proof That the person who builds the foundation controls the structure, no matter whose name is on the door. And somewhere across the bay, Ricky Graham was learning that lesson for the rest of his life. 1 year after taking control of Apex Systems, I stood on the stage at Tech Summit in Austin, looking out at 3,000 faces waiting to hear my keynote speech. The introduction had been generous. CEO of Apex Systems, ranked number 7 on Forbes's most influential tech leaders list. Architect of the industry's most talked about corporate turnaround. But what mattered most was the final line. A woman who proved that technical expertise is power. And that power, once reclaimed, is unstoppable. The applause was thunderous. I let it wash over me, remembering the woman who'd been escorted out of her own building by security just 12 months ago. She seemed like a different person now, smaller, more afraid, less certain of her own worth. A year ago, I began, my voice steady through the microphone. I was fired from the company I'd built, replaced by my husband's mistress. Erased from the narrative of my own success story. Today, I'm here to tell you why that was the best thing that ever happened to me. The room went silent. I could see phone cameras lighting up, journalists leaning forward, women in the front rows nodding with recognition. Because losing everything forced me to see something I'd been too close to recognize. My power was never in the company name, the CEO title, or the validation from people who didn't understand what I'd built. My power was in my expertise, in my ability to create, to solve, to build from nothing. And that power? No one could fire me from that. After the speech, the green room filled with people wanting to shake my hand, share their own stories of workplace betrayal, ask advice about reclaiming power in toxic environments. One woman, a software engineer whose male co-founder had recently tried to push her out, gripped my hands with tears in her eyes. I needed to hear this. I've been questioning whether I should just walk away, let him have it. Do you understand your infrastructure better than anyone else? I asked. Yes, I built all of it. Then you have power. Use it strategically. Document everything. And never let someone else define your worth. I handed her my card. Email me. I'll connect you with my lawyer. She left with her spine straighter, her shoulders back. I recognized that transformation. I'd lived it. That evening, I sat in my hotel room reviewing offers that had arrived in the past month. 3 acquisition proposals for Apex Systems, each valuing the company above $800 million. 4 venture capital firms wanting to fund my next venture. 7 boards requesting me as an advisor. 12 speaking engagements, offering 5-figure fees. A year ago, Ricky had tried to reduce me to nothing. Now I was being offered everything. But the offer I kept returning to was different. Smaller, more personal. A startup accelerator program specifically for women technical founders. They wanted me to lead it, not just advise, but build the curriculum, mentor the founders, create the ecosystem that would prevent other women from experiencing what I'd endured. It would mean stepping back from day-to-day operations at Apex Systems, handing over the CEO role to Natasha, who'd earned it 10 times over, focusing my energy on building something that mattered beyond revenue and market share. I drafted my response, accepting the position. The final piece of closure came unexpectedly, 2 weeks later. I was leaving Apex Systems headquarters, soon to be solely under Natasha's leadership, when I saw him. Ricky stood across the street, looking older than his 36 years, wearing a suit that had seen better days. For a moment, we just stared at each other across 4 lanes of San Francisco traffic. Then he crossed, and I waited, curious what desperation or courage had brought him here. Shannon. His voice was quiet. I'm not here to ask for anything. I just wanted to say, I'm glad you're succeeding. You deserve all of this. I studied his face, looking for manipulation, for angles, for the calculation that had once defined every interaction. But all I saw was genuine regret and the kind of exhaustion that comes from learning hard lessons too late. I heard you're starting something new, he continued. A program for women founders. That's good. Important. You'll change lives. I already have, I said simply. Including my own. He nodded, accepting the boundary in my words. I destroyed the best thing in my life. Both the company and you. I see that now. I just wanted you to know I understand what I lost. For a brief moment, I felt something that might have been pity. This man had once been my partner, my husband, my co-founder. We'd shared dreams and late-night coding sessions and a belief that we were building something extraordinary together. But he'd chosen ego over partnership, possession over collaboration. And now he stood before me. A cautionary tale about what happens when you mistake control for leadership. I hope you figure out who you are without trying to diminish someone else, I said. Not cruel. Just honest. That's the only advice I have for you. He nodded, knowing there was nothing more to say. Thank you. For building something incredible. For being brilliant enough to make me look good for 4 years. For not destroying me completely when you had every reason to. I didn't destroy you, Ricky. I corrected gently. You did that yourself. I just stopped fixing the problems you created. I walked away from him then. Toward the Tesla, parked at the curb, the one I'd bought myself with my first consulting bonus. Not financed through a company or compromised by shared ownership. In my rearview mirror, I watched him standing on the sidewalk. A man finally understanding the magnitude of what he'd thrown away. But I didn't feel triumph or vindication, or even satisfaction anymore. I felt free. Free from the need to prove myself to people who didn't value my expertise. Free from the weight of a marriage built on unequal power. Free from the narrative that business acumen mattered more than technical brilliance in a tech company. I'd spent 4 years building Graham Technologies, 6 months destroying it, and 1 year proving I never needed it in the first place. As I drove through San Francisco toward my next chapter, toward the accelerator program that would nurture the next generation of women technical founders, I thought about all the women who'd reached out after my story went public. Women who'd been sidelined by male co-founders. Women whose technical contributions had been erased from company histories. Women who'd been told their value was in support, not leadership. I'd become their proof that technical expertise was power. That the person who built the foundation controlled the structure, regardless of whose name was on the building. And Ricky? He'd become exactly what he'd always feared. A footnote in someone else's success story. The cautionary tale about what happens when you fire the architect while standing inside their creation. That night, I stood on my penthouse balcony watching the city lights shimmer across the bay. My phone buzzed with a message from the accelerator program director. First cohort of founders confirmed. 12 brilliant women, ready to build the future. Ready to change everything? I typed back, ready. Below me, San Francisco pulsed with the energy of 1,000 startups, 1,000 dreams, 1,000 technical founders building something from nothing. Some would succeed, some would fail. Some would face betrayal like I had. But now there would be a blueprint, a story. Proof that losing everything isn't the end, it's just the moment you stop building someone else's empire and start constructing your own. I'd walked through fire and emerged not just unburned, but refined, stronger, clearer about who I was and what I was worth. Ricky had tried to erase me from the story. Instead, he'd given me a better one to write. And this time, I was the only author. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.